Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan and I'm joined by Brian, and we are here each Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. You can find us on social media at Blue Sky and TikTok at Habsland Pod. Today, we'll be previewing the Four Nations tournament and, of course, doing our usual headlines of the week. But first, Brian, I usually like to start these episodes with a nice softball down the middle for you to get you involved. So here's another one. Really easy, cookie cutter. What are your thoughts on booing the American anthem at hockey games?
Wow. He says he's given me a lob and then a fastball right down the middle. I don't know how to answer this. Booing a national anthem in general, I'm not fond of course, but with these circumstances, it's clear that the boos are not directed towards the American people.
Correct.
They're directed towards one orange individual in particular. And so it's a very weird situation. And the fact that Canadians are having their voices heard on socials in other ways and deliberating their points more interestingly than just a boo, I like that part of it. The booing just basically says we're dissatisfied with how things are going, but yeah, not a good situation with these sanctions.
So three things on this before we'll absolutely move on. Not meant to linger on this too long. One is Justin Trudeau's comments on response to this question about like what are your thoughts on Canadians booing the anthem, which by the way we should mention we're referencing specifically the Ottawa Senators fans booing the anthem on Saturday, February 1st against New York Islanders. The Habs fans, by the way, Quebecers never meant to be left alone as pioneers, did this first a week ago against the Devils. So let's not forget that. But Trudeau basically did not condemn it. He just said, yeah, they're upset. It's okay. Second thing, you're right when you say it's about the White House. It's about that. It's not about actual American people. I have American friends. You have American friends. Like, of course, it's not about that. Three, this would all be simplified if we just got rid of anthems at NHL games. The fourth caveat, who's hosting the Four Nations? That's going to be really interesting to see what happens in a week. We're going to get into the Four Nations, not about the anthem stuff. Let's move on.
Well, just on your second point, very, very quickly, just to defend the American people a little bit more, I've seen countless people defending Canadians for doing this, by the way, on socials. I think hockey fans in general are probably more left-leaning anyway, so there's bias there certainly that you have to include in that. But it's nice to see that the Canadians who booed are getting a little bit of support from the American people who also don't agree with the craziness that's going on. So that was nice to see too, that we're not alone thinking this is nuts.
Headlines of the week. Let's get into that right now. 3 this week we'll go first with the Habsland headline. It is wind out of the sails. I saw a lot of RIP in the mix, January 2025 to January 2025 memes out there. Very good stuff. It's the Canadiens we spoke about it last week, kind of back down to earth. And we should mention we are recording the episode before the Anaheim game, though I think it is unlikely that our sentiment will change much, even with a big win in Anaheim, which is what we hope we will see. But Brian, I've seen one interesting piece of commentary, and I'll pitch it to you with this, that the Canadiens season peaked in that first period against the Leafs a few weeks ago. And since then, they have been outscored 29-14. Now, the caveat in here is they played well against Winnipeg and Minnesota. They got Connor Hellebucked in that Winnipeg game, and Minnesota just has the Habs number right now. But more generally, is that an accurate statement? I initially wanted to disagree with that because the Rangers wins right after that. But there's some truth to it. Is there not?
I think so. I think there's if you're calling it sort of the climax of the Montreal Canadiens playing very, very well against an arch rival like Toronto, that's the time when you really want to see them compete well. And that first period was dominance. It was absolute dominance of the Maple Leafs, one of the best teams in the East up until very recently, and now Florida seems to have passed them and is playing much better than Toronto, so at least there's that. But definitely there's some truth to it. I think that you could look at a bunch of different games, and we've mentioned them in the past, like the 4-0 win over Florida, beating Dallas right before the Toronto game, the 3-1 win. Like, both of those are pretty climaxy points in the Montreal Canadiens season, I would say, in how well they played against really good teams. So whether there's truth to that or not, you can't possibly argue that after that, the Canadiens haven't taken a monstrous hit. So our headline of wind out of the sails is definitely a true one. You mentioned the goals for, goals against, over the course, like since that Toronto game. It's a little bit even more damning when you just look at the past 4 games. 6 goals for, 16 against in the last 4 losses, those being at Detroit, then home against New Jersey, Winnipeg, and Minnesota. I agree. I did like the way that they played against Winnipeg and Minnesota, but in all 4 of these contests, and even a little bit prior to that, I'm finding that the chemistry, the offensive chemistry especially, that we were seeing is kind of going away, and that's worrisome. The Montreal Canadiens have not been able to score more than 3 goals in the past several games. Like since the Tampa Bay win, 3 goals has been their cap. When prior to that, they scored 5 against the Rangers. They scored 5 in Utah. They scored 5 against Vancouver. Like they were winning high-scoring games prior to that, and that's part of why they went on that tear for a while. We don't have Carey Price anymore, and we don't have an experienced defensive core, although they've been playing well, to be able to win games 2-1, 1-0 every night. So they really have to score more, and I think that playing against Anaheim, playing against San Jose especially, who's in just a tailspin right now, that might be what cures it, I hope, because then they got to go into LA, and then they got to play New Jersey and Tampa Bay right after that before the 4 nations break. So I think the offensive chemistry is a big thing here.
Let me ask you then, how much of this can be tied directly to the power play? Because the power play has 1 goal in its last 6 games.
Yeah, a lot.
I mean, part of that is also just the lack of opportunities. Had 1 opportunity against New Jersey, no power plays against Winnipeg. And I will say people want to complain about the refs all the time. Winnipeg was just like, when they were not playing well in that first period, they were just not taking dumb penalties and being very smart. And then they had the MVP in nets. And then when they woke up, they just kind of smacked the Canadiens around. The Canadiens were undisciplined. They took their penalties. Not that I don't think they gave up a power play goal in that game, but it reduces your momentum. We've talked about that in the past. And then against Minnesota, also only 1 power play opportunity. In general, the power play these last, 3 weeks or so, probably if you're going back the Vancouver game, they had 2. They went 2 for 4 on January 6th. Since then, 3 power play goals in total in these past 11 games. How much of it is the power play just kind of losing its momentum a bit?
Yeah, I want to start with the lack of opportunities because that's a big part of it. And I think the lack of offensive chemistry and the lack of cutting to the middle, for lack of a better way of describing it, that's how you draw penalties. You have to, when a team is playing the way that Winnipeg is, they're playing really well, and even when they're struggling, they're being very disciplined. You have to force them into taking a penalty if you want an opportunity, and the Canadiens just haven't been doing that. Like earlier, a couple weeks back, I remember Kirby Dach drawing 2 penalties within the span of a few games that were both him just forcing them. Like, the only way that they're going to stop me from getting this puck to the net is by hooking me, slashing me, tripping me, doing something. Suzuki's done that before. Caulfield's done that. And there's been a little bit of a lack of that. So that's crucial. Also, teams, like on the power play itself, teams are figuring out that Laine's the weapon, and the Canadiens don't know what to do with Caulfield right now. He's had some opportunities in that middle spot, but that's where the most foot traffic is. And Caulfield's a guy who needs a one-timer with a straight lane. He's not a guy who's shooting through 3 players, threading the needle. That's just not in his skill set yet. Can he develop that? Sure. But right now he's a line A guy who sits on the top of the circle, waits for the clapper, and puts it through the goalie. So figuring that out, I think, is crucial. And I think that they're just not trying other things either. They try to go to Caulfield. They try to go to Line A. We're out of ideas. Let's just try those again. Suzuki has a rip shot. Yeah. Lane Hudson can take a shot with traffic in front of the net. Like Slavkovsky could bombard the front of the net with Lane Hudson taking a shot. They had been doing seam passes prior to that to the guy right in front of the net. And this isn't even talking about the second unit. The second unit, whatever. The top unit was unbelievable up until this bad stretch. So that's really where you want to see the goals coming from. So, what do you think about that assessment? Am I missing something?
No, you're bang on, and I think it was kind of nice of Minnesota to shadow Laine so hard in the Habs 1 power play opportunity on Thursday night, because it quite literally forced the Habs to be like, okay, what else are we supposed to do here? And I've been saying, I think for at least a month now, they need to figure out what to do with Cole Caulfield now that Patrick Laine has his success. You were talking about him being placed at the bumper spot. I agree. The bumper spot I don't think is a place for a 5'9" forward to be positioned. Like it's
Five
not.
seven, isn't he?
Well, I'm trying to be nice. So like I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out like what's the best play to do. Like this might sound stupid because he's been the reason the power play up until recently he was on fire. But can you flip Line into the bumper spot and put Caulfield back at the half wall? Does that make more sense? Like they seem to like Slavkovsky, and they found the success last year, not so much this year. With Slav being the quasi net front but really side of the net player. The cross seam pass has not really been coming around this year, and they like Suzuki in the off wing spot. Like we're just never gonna admit that. Like my preference would be basically you flip Suzuki and you flip Slavkovsky and you flip Line and you flip Caulfield. So it's for people trying to imagine it. Hudson doesn't move. The left half wall is Lane Hudson. Sorry, is Cole Caulfield. Get that one timer. Opposite half wall is Uri Slavkovsky. Yet another one timer. You put Suzuki as like the quote net front. We need a better term for that because he's really would just be zipping along the goal line basically the entire time, and he can be kind of rover-y. And then you put Patrick Laine in the bumper position, and if you have Suzuki as a net front guy, he can still find both of them. And basically, you have one timers across the board. I think that's more appropriate, but I also understand the fact that Laine has just been dynamite from the half wall, and you might not want to move it. But if that's the case, not everything is fitting quite well. But I was that one opportunity they had against Minnesota. I thought they created several good chances. Now, again, Minnesota was shadowing Laine so incredibly, like it was almost comical how close they were to Patrick Laine. And the Canadiens got good opportunities because of it. It's not always going to be that pronounced. But anyway, things need to be changed. There's other bits of the game that's like goaltending it was on a hot streak. I think it's starting to come down a little bit, not poor like we saw with Caden Primo earlier in the year, but it's come down a bit of a level.
Yeah.
The bottom six scoring, especially without Emil Heineman, has cooled off a little bit. The second line at 5-on-5 to me is still hit or miss. So it's just kind of like they were playing at such a high level, they were never going to maintain it, and now they're kind of coming back down to earth in some places. The death stretch is over, so hopefully a easier schedule will allow some of these warts to be worked out. At least that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, if they can keep to their identity, right? We've said that 1,000 times, that by playing down to your opposition, you're not going to win many games, and keeping the identity that they had against the top teams is the best way of doing it. I think I like your idea of shifting the power play around, because what all other teams' penalty kills are going to do now is look at this Minnesota game and say, you see the way they were shadowing Laine, and you see how the Montreal Canadiens did not score? Let's just do that. And the other thing I want to say is that I think the power play also works a little bit better when Suzuki, Hudson, and Caulfield are not sedentary. So I like your formulation of where those guys should be, but if they also get to be a little bit nomad and move around, I don't mind that at all. But you keep your two one-timer guys in their positions. Slavkovsky at one side, Laine at the other side. Or if it's Caulfield, whatever. But I think Laine being a sedentary guy is right, because he's not shifty like Caulfield is. Caulfield can mosey around wherever he wants to be sneaky. Laine can't. He's 6'5", and he doesn't have the speed Caulfield has. He's better as that guy. So two different ideas for the power play. I'm hoping they try one of them, or just try something different to try and get that going. You mentioned the other parts of the lineup that are working and not working. I think a big part of what's been going wrong with the Canadiens lately is a part of the lineup that's not due to the play of the players, but sadly due to a really bad injury. Caden Gooley is out right now due to quadricep muscle laceration or tear. I'm not exactly sure. Neither one of us are medical professionals, so we're not going to try and figure out how long he's going to be out, but it is not going to be soon that he's coming back, unfortunately. And right after, like 1 week after you and I were saying, wow, the best pairing is Gooley-Carrier, they're really centering this defensive unit and they're figuring things out. And because of them, Hudson and Matheson are able to have fun and just go out, and like everything's centered around them defensively. And now that Gooley's out, Struble gets a shot, which is nice for him, but Struble's not Gooley.
Oh, no. And that's also part of the headline of the wind out of the sails, was clearly the Gooley injury affected the team from Tuesday into Thursday night against Minnesota. And what that will do to the defensive system that the Canadiens had really figured I'm not saying they were world beaters, but they had definitely figured out to be at least league average, or if maybe even slightly above that, with Gooley and Carrier being kind of the pillar, and they were getting more and more minutes these last few games before. Well, they actually had gotten split up on Tuesday. There was the whole Matheson stuff, which we don't want to talk about today, but like Caden Gooley getting hurt is a real bummer. There's one guy I want to bring up later in the podcast if people are worried about like Gooley not being able to stay healthy for an 82 game season. There's another guy I'm going to bring up later that I think when we talk about him, we all think he's had a really good career so far, despite the fact that he's also been out injured. The one other bit I'll say about the Gooley stuff is there was a weird, almost like chilling, haunting vibe. The fact that if you rewind to October of 2023, Kirby Dach, who at that point we were like, yeah, it's Dach, it's second line center, let's do it, gets hurt. He's out for the year. The very next game, the Canadiens are at home against the Minnesota Wild. They were lifeless. They lose 5-2. We were like, what the heck is going to go on? They just look like a bunch of sad boys out there. You fast forward to this week, Gooley gets hurt. The very next game is at home against the Minnesota Wild. They get shut out 4-0. We'll talk about the funner part of that, unfortunately, in a bit. But
yeah,
all I'm saying is the next time the Habs are playing the Minnesota Wild at home, maybe we just forfeit the match beforehand.
Yeah,
I just
keep everybody's health as a priority.
There's just bad juju now with like whoever. I'm going to look at it on the schedule. Who are we playing before we host the Wild? We know we get destroyed in Minnesota, and then when Minnesota comes to town, it usually means one of our top young guys gets hurt. It's kind of creepy. With that, Brian, let's move on to our other two headlines. We can do these ones, I think, a bit quicker. We'll go with mine. My headline of the week is Silly Money Season Awaits. So this comes from I believe it was an internal NHL memo sent around. Whether it was leaked or not, we all saw it. So essentially the salary cap projections for these next 3 years, if you're just pointing upwards, you are being accurate. It is jumping from $88 million this season to in 3 years to $113.5 million. That is a $25 million plus increase over 3 years. We're looking at next season 95.5, so it's $7.5 million jump, then another $9 million jump, then another $9 million jump. It's gigantic. It's kind of wild that we were stuck at 80, 81, 82 for like 5 seasons, and now in the blink of an eye, it's going to jump 25, 30%, 35%. Canadiens have 13 million in cap space for what it is. Like if we ground it a bit with the Habs, like Habs have 13 in cap space for next season. That includes price. So if you do the LTIR of it, the Habs kind of have more, but 13 million-ish. And then obviously like once the price contract is wiped, then we have the one more year of Anderson and Gallagher. Like the Habs have like their own like special extra cap space popping up over the next 2 years, but it's going to get kind of weird, right, Brian? Like I feel like players are going to be less incentivized to sign those extensions over the next, certainly this year. I mean, we're already seeing it a bit, but over the next 2 or 3 years, there's going to be less of an incentive to sign an extension and more like go out the free agency because everyone has money.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that. We're going to see a lot more bridge deals for guys who have proven it.
Yeah.
Guys who should be signing 8 years for whatever, 10 a year might say, you know what, I want 2 years at 7. Like I'll just take the hit now and hope I'm healthy and playing as well in 2 years, and then I'll sign for 14 or something, and it'll still be the same percentage of the cap. Like that's really what we're seeing here is with this giant increase. And it also makes you feel a little bit bad, at least me personally. I feel a little bit bad for Caulfield, Suzuki, these guys who signed just prior to this crazy increase. It makes me wonder if there should almost be some type of like adjustment that doesn't necessarily hit the cap, but they get a little more money somehow, bonuses, something like that. Like when 3 of your best players are going to be making less than some of the ones you sign after purely because the cap goes up. How fair is that? I don't know. It's also going to make it so that the next time they have to sign in, 5, 6, and 7 years respectively, or 8, I guess, in the case of Slavkovsky, they're going to be looking for big paychecks at that point. So it might screw the cap for the Canadiens way down the line. But for now, we're laughing. Holy crap! Your first line center is going to make. I mean, let's do the math here. Is going to make like 6 or 7% of the cap when it's at like 105. Yeah. I guess 7% ish. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're right about the fact that I think it's the Suzuki and Slav, TBD on Slav, but certainly Suzuki and Caulfield. Well, I would say even kind of on Caulfield, a player of his stature being really effective into his 30s, I have doubts about, but let's enjoy what we have for the next 5 years and leave that conversation for the future. Suzuki's the one guy that might come around and be like, hey, I took a good contract for you. Everyone signed under me. you owe me extra now. I want 15 million a year.
Yeah, he's going to ask them to double it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 years from now, he's going to say, okay, double it now. Double it. 4 years at 16.
So, like, for the Canadian standpoint, like, certainly free agency becomes a little bit more tantalizing this summer and next, because you're still in a position where the contracts for the most part are not going to be expensive. We'll get into once we get to the offseason what Hudson's next contract will look like. But other than Hudson and Demidov, I don't really see someone right now that I'm like kind of like holding my chest being like, oh my gosh, how much can the Canadians afford this guy? They have their two best forwards currently locked up. I guess Line A is the other guy that they would kind of need to figure out, but he's a little isolated, I think, considering what he's gone through in the past couple seasons and what he has to show that he's healthy too. So, question maybe to wrap this headline up, wasn't meant to be a long one. The NHL has a rule where you can only make a maximum of 20% of the NHL salary cap. We're seeing the highest numbers right now. We were talking about it 2 weeks ago, last week, about Mikko Rantanen trying to get the 14 million a year. And we're seeing guys, the 12 and a half, the 13s, like slowly, other than Sid just is 8.7 forever. Everyone else has like been slowly creeping up that number. So like the top guys in the NHL are between 12 and 13-ish right now. Once we get to 2027 season, a player will theoretically be able to make $20 million a year. I don't know if it's going to happen right away. But Brian, if you could bet money on it, who is the first NHL player to surpass $20 million a year in their contract?
So this is assuming that one of those bridge things doesn't happen where a guy says, give me 11 for the next 2 years. I'm waiting for that giant cap boost, and then it's going to ask for 20. I think there's only one guy you could really consider for this. It's Jack Hughes.
Okay.
It's absolutely going to be Jack Hughes. Here's why. 2029 is when he needs the renewal. So 2 years after the theoretical possibility of 20 million. Like in theory, players could be making, 15 or 6? Oh no, actually more than 16 now, and they're not.
Yeah.
It's going to take a couple years after the possibility of being able to hit that single player cap for it to actually occur. He'll be going into his prime at that point, and man, did he take a team friendly deal. 8 million for Jack Hughes already. Like he's going to go, look what I did for you guys. Now do something for me. I want 20.
So great pick. Not who I thought you were going towards. I thought you were going towards Austin Matthews, who has his contract is he is very smartly handled. He has been one of those guys that is not taking the 8-year deal and has done little 4 and 5 year deals at a time. I think he's also, and it'd be interesting to actually see like the delta between the maximum salary attainable and the top salary given out that year, and to see if that gap has shrunk over the years. So for instance, let's say like when the salary cap was $50 million, theoretically $10 million was the cap in terms of how much someone could make. Maybe the highest someone was getting paid was like 6 or 7. So we had that, 30% gap. It's getting smaller now. If Matthews is at 13.25 and the max that you could theoretically make right now is about 18 or so, or 18, 19, somewhere along that range, like, okay, like there's still a pretty big gap. I feel like Matthews could be the first guy. If not, we have to project really forward into the Celebrini and Bedard zone. But I think the point is that like cap is going to be jumping up really high. The Canadians really only have 2 guys that I'd be worried about, you're having to like really make sure you saw the numbers correctly in the contract. McDavid's going to get a lot of money soon, but I feel like he might also do a little bridge thing where he might take a 3-4 year deal before, really forcing the Oilers when he's like 30 years old to say 8-year deal, 17, 18 million a year. That's it. We're done. Brian, what was your headline this week?
My headline is Flower Power Finale.
Right.
In the few short years that we've been doing this podcast, Jordan, Marc-Andre Fleury has featured as the focal point in many of our segments, despite him not being a Hab. And this is because he's obviously a beloved Quebecois and Canadian hockey goaltender who always jumps into high gear when he plays the Canadiens, especially in Montreal at the Bell Center. Flower is really one of the last great scramblers, I like to think. He seemingly belongs more in like the Hasek era than in the present one, owing to his really exciting risk-taking and his lay it all on the line to make a diving save brilliance that he does basically every single night. On Thursday night, Marc-Andre Fleury becomes the first goaltender in NHL history to record a shutout as a teenager and also at 40 years or older. So what an unbelievable feat for an instantly great goalie at 18 years old. I was looking at his first starts at 18 years old when he joined the league, about 950-ish average in his first 4 starts. Unreal. Are you kidding me? And then he's still great at 40. What a treat it was that he could achieve this in Montreal against the Canadiens. And wow, he sure got an abundance of love from the fans in the Bell Center on Thursday night. And just in terms of that game specifically, obviously he was great all night. I think the Canadiens could have played a little better, but regardless, not taking it away, he was great all night when he was tested. And when it was 2-0, he robbed Anderson 4 or 5 times straight in a shift early into the third, and momentum shifted right away back to Minnesota. Like, that was the most life the Canadiens had all night. He robs Anderson 4 or 5 times on the same shift, and then Minnesota scores the 3-0 goal, and the game was basically over at that point.
I really thought when the Habs pulled the goalie with like 4 minutes left, I'm like, he's scoring. He's absolutely going to score a goal right now. And like, there were moments where, like, first of all, the Canadiens were awful with the empty net. They barely had possession. There were moments where a Minnesota defenseman would have the puck at their own blue line while the Habs would be changing or whatever. And I was like, are they going to pass it back to Flower so he can take a shot? Like, I really thought they would do that. And like, I don't know. Like, I thought them like that. This would actually be really cool. 40 years old, final game at the Bell Center, shutout and a goal. I guess thankfully for the Canadiens that did not happen. But I really thought for a moment, like, I'm like, oh, I've never been so nervous with an empty net goal like on the line. 3-0 game, no chance of ever winning. There was no point in pulling the goalie there. Of course. That was, and then, you know, props to the Canadiens fans for. I will say, Habs fans do love to pat themselves on the back for being like smart hockey historians. I'm still not over the Charo stuff, but
yeah, no, that's
Marc-Andre Fleury makes a ton of sense. He's a Quebecois. He's been in the NHL for 20 years. He has represented Canada a ton of times. And the Habs have also destroyed him in the playoffs. So, like, we don't care about a regular season shutout.
That's right.
First of all, you knew I pulled these numbers. On. He is 4-7 in the playoffs against the Montreal Canadiens with an .896 save percentage and a .266 goals against average. He lost both series. Actually, he lost the first one, which is 2010. Second round, he got shellacked.
Yeah.
And then 2021 with Vegas, he's benched after game 4. So, just...
The giveaway was lovely, too.
Yeah. It's great.
That's the one I think of.
So like that's part of the reason I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's good. Like, standing ovation, great career, awesome. I hope he sticks around in some capacity in hockey. I'm sure he will. Just I wonder how front facing it would be. I wonder if he's one of those guys that could very much walk into an RDS job or a TVS ball job
tomorrow,
like, right away.
Tomorrow,
like,
he'd be so compelling. Yeah, absolutely. He's so personable. He knows the game so well. He'd be great in that. He'd be really, really great in that.
Like the younger, more recently retired players kind of kicking out the older guys. Like, there's some, like, Denis Gauthier is probably the best RDS analyst along with McMartini. And it's because, like, well, they're the more recent players. Believe it or not, not the guy who played in the 80s who was average and is kind of just says random stuff and barely watches hockey anymore. Like, Gautier's great, Denis great. I can only imagine that Fleury would be awesome. Anything else on Fleury?
Yeah, I'll turn this into a compliment sandwich after you crapped on him for his playoff abilities. 3-time Stanley Cup winner. He won the Vezina and the Jennings in 2021. And he's also the third goaltender to reach 500 wins in the NHL behind 2 other Quebecois legends, Roy and Brodeur. So joining those two is a pretty special thing, reaching 500 wins in the NHL. That just does not happen very often. So unbelievable career, Flower. We love you, even though you never wore the CH. We love you, and all the best to you.
Yeah, the longevity is something real. 3-time Cup champion, even though only one time he was actually the starting goletender. Great stuff.
Compliment sandwich. You end with the good.
All right.
You always end with the good.
Well done,
His
Flower.
name's on the cup.
You were awesome. All right, let's hop into part 2 of the podcast. We're going to do some Four Nations preview here, Brian. Four Nations coming up, I believe, starting on February 12th. Canada is playing Sweden at the Bell Center, and then the games kind of continue onwards. Bit of an odd schedule. I think it's actually really cool that the Sweden-Finland game is at 1 p.m. Eastern time, so that it's prime time back in Europe. The one weird one that I know a lot of the Quebecois are not going to like is February 17th. Canada-Finland is at 1 p.m. Eastern. That's because it's a holiday in the regular part of Canada, but you folks need Saint Jean-Baptiste, so you don't get the family day in mid-February. So beyond that, all the games are at 8 o'clock. The finals on the 20th. We'll see what happens when we get there. It's a It's a neutral site round robin, so usual group stage stuff. You play everybody once, and then top 2 teams will be in the final. Not a complicated format.
Yeah.
Brian, we're going to get into it. Like, what do we think about Team Canada? We'll obviously make our predictions just generally about the tournament. How do you feel like going into this is a new thing? This is a Four Nations tournament. There have been versions of this kind of that I will say the NHL has put on over the past 15, 20 years, not often. But what is your excitement level going into this tournament that is now just over a week away?
Yeah, I'm really not as excited as I thought I would be, Jordan. The hype for this tournament, it feels a little like sterile, frankly. And I think it should. Like, it's an international tournament with only 4 teams. Next year's Olympics are going to be hype as hell. So I think we've had to alter our expectations for this tournament in comparison to that one. And also just in comparison to the 8 or 12 tournaments that we've seen in the past. Because like the omission of Russia, Slovakia, Czechia, Germany, Switzerland, and the omission of players like Ovechkin, Hischier, Draisaitl, Pasternak, Malkin, Kucherov, Zuccarello, Seider, like Ehlers, the list just goes on and on. It just shows very, very clearly that this is like a goofy one-off excuse for an international tournament. And I'm not only saying that because I really don't like Canada's chances. Or am I?
No, so here's the thing. You use the word sterile. I think that's one of many different adjectives that we could use in this sense. I think like it feels very manufactured. Like,
oh yeah, I like that word.
Almost like corporate. Like it's like one of those music festivals. I mean, you and I have gone to some music festivals. It's one of those music festivals that once upon a time was very like grounded and down to earth, and now has been bought out by Live Nation and just feels a little
Woodstock 99, man. This is Woodstock 99 for the NHL.
Very much so. Yeah. Like it just feels like it's been corporate washed, even though I'm not literally talking about like corporations getting involved, although it kind of is. It's the NHL and Sportsnet that are really the two that are pushing this. I was looking this morning, so this is Sunday, February 2nd, on the Athletics NHL homepage, and there's nothing about the Four Nations 8 days out. You go to Sportsnet, you have to scroll a bit, but you'll eventually find a McDavid thing about the Four Nations, but also Sportsnet they're broadcasting the games. They literally have a vested interest. Same goes for NHL.com. So they don't count. So I tried to look at a neutral party with the Athletic, and I literally couldn't find anything a week out. And I just feel like even the announcements has just made it feel soulless. Like the first 6 being named in the summer, and then we got the full rosters. But even the full rosters, it was like the NHL decided on what days they were coming out and how they were controlling them coming out. And then the jersey reveals, and then the whole captain stuff this past week, it just feels very like we have a marketing plan for this, and it just does not feel authentic. It feels orchestrated, I think is another word I'm looking for. Like, it doesn't feel like there's like a groundswell of, oh my God, this is going to be great. It's more like, look how great this looks. You really need to be getting excited for this. This is hockey. This is international hockey. That's been my feeling going into it. It feels kind of icky, but sterile, manufactured, orchestrated. Like that's just kind of the energy I have. Once the puck drops, it might feel different, but that's how it feels right now.
Well, certainly it's going to feel different because the hockey itself is going to be great because it's the best players from these four nations. And these teams are comprised entirely of elite hockey players, right? I mean, like, you know, Finland, Sweden, okay, fair enough. Maybe not the entire lineup is elite if Joel Armia is on one of those teams. Nothing against Joel Armia. He's a perfectly serviceable bottom six guy, but he's not elite. But, like, I think the other reason the hype is less than what we think the NHL was hoping for is it's NHL players only playing in NHL arenas, battling for a title that doesn't mean shit.
Yep.
If the USA wins it, like we all think they should, who cares? Like, it's not a gold medal. It's not a double IHF championship. It's a one-off Four Nations face-off victory. To play for one's country, to bring home the gold is an unbelievable honor. It's something I think every athlete on the planet would absolutely dream of doing. But there's not one hockey player in the world who as a kid was practicing their shot in the driveway saying, and the shot goes in, Canada has just won the Four Nations face-off. Exactly. Right? Like it's going to be a bunch of NHLers trying not to get injured because the Stanley Cup will be awarded in a few months, and they would all much prefer to win a single playoff round than win this tournament.
So I'm glad you brought that up because that's going to bring us a bit into the Pietrangelo stuff. But to kind of like finish the loop on like no one envisions this tournament. Like, what does even the trophy look like? Is there a trophy? Is it a certificate you get at the end of this when you win? Are we going to even remember this tournament in 5 years? Because like I was doing the exercise of like, what about the other international tournaments? Well, I remember 2002 in Salt Lake. That's the Lucky Looney. That's it's a 5-2 win. I remember 2006 where the Canadians lose in the quarterfinal. It's very embarrassing. Then you have Sweden and Finland going toe-to-toe in the final with Koivu stick breaking. We've talked about it. It makes me very sad. 2010, the golden goal. How do you not remember what happened? Like Canada loses to the U.S. in the group stage, and we're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Then they come back, they actually blow the lead, and then they win it in overtime. 2014, the real gold medal match is actually the semifinal against Team USA. Carey Price has a 1-0 shutout, and that's like, once we got through the U.S., I was like, we're done. We're good. Beat Sweden 3-0. So I remember those. Like, right? Now,
of course,
in this same time span, these are all tournaments other than Torino where Canada wins. 2004 World Cup, Brian? I think Jerome McGinley had a great tournament. I can't tell you what happened. I literally don't. I'm pretty sure it was at the Air Canada Centre in Toronto. I can't remember. 2016 World Cup. I remember the gimmicks. I remember the Team North America, which was the U23s, and Team Europe. And I remember it was like a funky like best of 3 final, which I think was Team Europe versus Canada, and Canada won. But like I don't remember anything about those tournaments. And is that just because it's like it's Olympics versus this like again manufactured NHL specific curated thing, and is the Four Nations not just going to fall into that group as well?
I think so. I mean, like you asked, are we going to remember this tournament in 5 years? My answer is, I mean, probably not.
Yeah.
That's really what I think. I think it's going to be like an all-star game. That's how it's going to sort of feel. And I don't remember all-star games. All the amazing tournaments that you mentioned, yeah, I have recollection of those for sure. Some incredible moments. And maybe there will be a great moment in this one. Maybe Canada comes back in the final against the USA and scores an unreal goal. McKinnon plays well. Who knows? Like maybe we will, in fact, remember it in 5 years. But it's certainly not going to make a statement the way that Olympic tournaments make statements. And when everybody else is in the tournament. That's the other thing too here. It's just the fact that it's 4 teams, omitting Russia and all these other important countries. Like,
well, it's also like disheartening that there was a report this week from Darren Dreger where it seems like the NHL and the NHLPA has advised the IIHF that they're intending on bringing back the World Cup of Hockey in 2028, but without the IIHF's involvement. And that to me means we're going to see something like the 2016 World Cup, where they're going to make up teams. We're going to have like we're going to have another Team Europe. We're going to have I don't know, like a alt team for North America again, like, which again will feel like, because it's NHL curated and because they're doing these weird things where they're eliminating teams for no good reason, it's not going to feel authentic.
So I will voice this because I disagree with that a little bit, just because if it's if the point is parity, making it so that any of the 8 teams can win, I think it's kind of okay. Because realistically, like, yes, Germany has Draisaitl. Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Do they stand a chance against Canada or USA? You know what I mean?
It does. Well, then, like, why did Canada go to the World Cup for soccer? Like, should we have just merged with USA and Mexico at that point? It's the same argument.
You know what? Very well said. All right, I back down. No, that's a really good point. Fair enough.
It's your own country. It'd be cool if you see Captain Draisaitl, no? And he's there just trying to like do everything he can versus Czechia, and like you have Slavkovsky and Mishar and Nemec and all those guys, and like they're trying to figure out like that might be it. Maybe there's an upset. I don't know. It's like it needs to be. It's manufactured. It's BS. You mentioned all-star vibes. Let's go to Pietrangelo, and that'll help us go into the Canada as part of this discussion. Pietrangelo, by the way, is still playing 23, 24 minutes a night, but he said, "Look, I have some bumps and bruises. I'm going to opt to rest my body for 10 days." rather than represent his country. I'm paraphrasing. He made it sound a lot like a much more difficult decision. I think those are the nuts and bolts of it. So you can talk about this from a tournament perspective, Brian, or like we can shift this into the Canada one. But like your argument about like, well, it's just an all-star game. Well, that's it. That's Exhibit A. Is Canada's number 3 defenseman being like, I'm still playing hockey, but I'd rather take a week and a half off and go vacation.
Yeah, and he's also Canada's most experienced defenseman and probably Canada's most awarded defenseman. He is not injured. He's played healthily in several games since this announcement was made. And so it's very eerily similar to Ovechkin's withdrawals from the All-Star game, where the player just doesn't care about the event 1/100th as much as they do about their NHL club's chances at holding Lord Stanley. And so I think this really just says that the tournament doesn't matter. And it also says that the Vegas Golden Knights are going to continue to slight everyone else and bend the rules in order to steal another Stanley Cup. You know, they're not actually bending the rules. It's the player's choice to go or not. But I would not be surprised if Vegas management had their foot a little bit on the scale here, saying, you know what, you're getting old now, Pietrangelo. You don't have it anymore. You should really rest up, buddy. We need you for the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, this is the manufacturer part of it. This is also the fact that we've never kind of figured out the best time of year to have an international tournament. The IHF does their stuff in April, May-ish. The NHL has tried with previous World Cups of hockey to do stuff in September, and it always feels a little awkward. And then there's obviously the Olympics, which they're trying to mimic here with the February stuff. They've yet to really find the perfect time of year for this, and doing this 2 months before playoffs feels like the worst possible option. But I also don't know, like, I don't know, like maybe the best time of the year is like mid-November. But then like there's the whole like, we're scared of the NFL stuff would pop up. But that might be the best time. Like, you're a bit into the season. You're 8 weeks into the season. You have a 2-week tournament. And yeah, they'd be scared of the football stuff, so they would never do it. But that might be the best time, because now when you have a 35-year-old defenseman who has some bumps and bruises, but like you said, like he's still playing every game. They just look at each other and be like, let's give you 2 weeks off, and then you're ready for the playoffs. Yeah,
I just don't think there is a good time for this tournament. So what they have to do, regardless of when it is, they have to make sure the tournament is so important for the countries that the players elect to go no matter what. Where if this was the Olympics, I have no doubt in my mind that Pietrangelo tells Vegas management, screw off, I'm playing for Canada. You're not going to keep me out of here. Like, that's like an Olympic gold to me is the only thing that rivals the Stanley Cup. Stanley Cup is the pinnacle of hockey in my estimation. An Olympic gold, that would be second, and that would be the thing that you want to be able to play for your country as well as for your NHL team. And so that's sort of the highest honor in playing for your own country as a hockey player. So that really, to me, is the only thing that rivals it. So next year, if Pietrangelo gets the call, which I don't think he does at 36, especially after stepping out this year, Canada defensemen, get ready to have one more spot open up for you guys next year.
Yeah.
But I think he says yes to going if it's the Olympics.
So just so I have clarity on this, it's Stanley Cup, Clarence Campbell Trophy, then the Olympic gold medal. Where does Marc Bergevin fit into this? Sorry.
Oh God.
I tend to agree with you. Yeah, it's tough. I don't know if they've announced this yet, so let's get you on the record. Evan Bouchard or Mackenzie Weegar, who's more likely to get that replacement spot?
More likely is Bouchard, but I think I would pick Weegar.
Agreed. Let's talk about Canada. We've talked about Canada a bunch, and part of it is like we've gone through. We did our lineups and what it would look like, which we were kind of okay with. Like, I think the top 6 that you and I created, I think is the exact top 6 we're going to end up seeing, where it's going to be McDavid, McKinnon, Reinhart as that's the top group, and then we'll have Crosby, Stone, and Marchand as the second line. Third and fourth line we got completely wrong. Before we get into the forwards, because that's the exciting stuff, we have mentioned over and over again goaltending, right? We saw Connor Hellebuck this week. We watch Samuel Montembeault on a regular basis. Jordan Binnington's not having a great year. Aiden Hill's been all right. But at the end of the day, this is a short tournament. It's 3 games to make it to the final. You pretty much only have to win 2 of the 3, I would presume, unless goal differential really comes into it. A 2-1 record probably gets you to the final, and then you just need one good game. Are we overthinking goaltending, Brian?
I don't think so. Like, with the severity of the difference between each country's goaltenders and Canada's, like, goaltending will be a factor in this tournament. And for Canada, it's just a definite weak point compared to all 3 other nations. In goals saved above expected, Hellebuck leads the entire NHL. That's why you called him the MVP. You know who else should be considered for MVP? A Canadian goaltender named Logan Thompson, who's just behind Hellebuck in both goals saved above expected, which we both agree is probably the most important stat for goaltenders. And then, by the way, .924 and .215 are his save percentage and goals against average. So Logan Thompson absolutely should have gotten the call. It sucks that he didn't. And then there's just this flat out point. Like I mentioned Hellebuck, but here's the list of goaltenders in the tournament that I would choose over all 3 Canadian goalies. Hellebuck, Ottinger, and Swayman from the USA. Sure. Allmark, Markstrom, and Gustafsson from Sweden, and Saros from Finland.
Yeah.
Do you agree with Markstrom and Gustafsson? I see you're hesitating more so than with the USA ones.
Actually, Swayman was the one guy. I'm like, he's had a crappy year. But I think in general, I'd agree with all those names. More or less. you might be. Might argue Aiden Hill into like a tier with those guys towards the end. Those the Swedish goaltenders, the backup ones. And just with Jeremy Swayman's not going to matter in this tournament, but Swayman's form this year, he might be further down the list than you would have initially thought. But no, You're right. Not having Logan. This is another thing about the manufactured component of this tournament. Why do we have to name the rosters 2.5 months in advance?
Yeah, exactly.
If this is an the pinnacle, like the absolute example for international tournaments is FIFA. It's like they have their own corruption issues, but in terms of like how it is organized, it is FIFA. They do not announce the rosters 2.5 months early. They announce them about 4 to 5 weeks early. So early-ish, mid-January probably should have been when they announced it, not early December. And if that's the case, if it's mid-January, Logan Thompson's on this team.
Of course, he's the starter, and he would make a giant difference, I think, in this tournament. Like, because now the plan has to be score a boatload of goals and try to win games 7-6. Which, against the best players from Sweden, Finland, and the USA especially, that's a very tall order, Jordan.
But that's not the plan because the bottom six does not reflect that.
Correct. So what the hell are we doing here? So this is why the goalies matter, man. Because also the team was not built around all-out offense, which would be the way to
I can see the pain in your face
try
right
and
now.
win. Oh, God. Yeah, I'm not happy.
So, again, another one to be on the record here. I would say Aiden Hill's the starter against Sweden opening night. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's going to be Bennington?
I think it should be Monty.
Yeah.
But it probably will be Hill.
They're not going to do a rotate.
It probably will be Hill.
Like, let's presume it's Canada, Sweden. Canada wins 4-3. They're not going to rotate, are they?
No, I don't think so.
You have one guy and you go. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, unless he plays like crap.
Yeah,
which
for sure.
Could be. All three of these goalies have stinkers of games, on the regular. Unless they play like crap, they're going to stay in it, I think. They'll keep the guy.
So, top 6 forwards, I think we're set with. It's going to be Dynamite, McDavid, McKinnon, Reinhart, Crosby, Stone, Marchand. The bottom 6, Brian, it's that classic Hockey Canada sandpaper. I shouldn't say that. Braden Point's the center on the third line, along with probably, I'm going to guess Cirelli's the fourth line center. And
yeah,
then
I would think so.
I guess you're going to put Marner with Braden Point on the third line?
I mean, we might be, I don't know if we might be galaxy braining this. Isn't the Tampa Bay coach just going to put Hagel, Point, and Cirelli on the top line and say F everybody else? There's already been a good deal of...
yeah, I don't know.
Hey, you guys made the team even though you don't deserve it.
Maybe. I mean, I think the point of having those players on the team is that Cooper knows them so well that in whatever role that they are defined, he knows exactly what they can contribute. Now, they have not gone up against these level of quality lines. They'll go up against top lines in the NHL. These are not top NHL lines they'll be going up against, especially Team USA, which is that's what this tournament's about. You got to beat Sweden in your first game of the tournament. Interestingly, how it's the schedule is set up, and I know why they did it like this. They play Team USA in their second match, and then they play Finland third. They put Team USA second so that they don't end up in the position where Canada USA play the third game of the round robin and then the final next to each other, back to back.
Right. Okay.
But realistically, if we're going by IHF rules, the two best teams play each other at the end of the round robin, so you know where everybody stacks up. Canada's not going to be in this situation, so it's likely beat Sweden, lose to USA, and then try to beat Finland to make your way into the final. That's likely what we're looking at. Yeah. So I don't know. The bottom 6. Yeah. It's you can do Point, Marner, Bennett, Point, Marner, Hagel. I don't know.
I expect Hagel, but Bennett. I think Bennett would be fine on the fourth line with Cirelli. I think that makes more sense. But yeah, Marner not on the fourth line makes a lot of sense. Third line is great for that. Yeah, just very weird identity of this forward group.
Top power play unit. Tell me what they are.
Oh, top power play unit. That's interesting.
McCarr's easy. McDavid's easy. McKinnon's easy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Crosby for his smarts, possibly, but you might want him to center the second unit with Point, have both of those guys on there. Marchand as a net front guy, possibly. Oh, no. Sorry, Reinhart. Reinhart 100%. He's the elite shot on that unit.
Okay, so it's the top line plus Makar and Marner?
Yeah, probably Marner.
Okay. I'm fine
and then
with
that leaves you Crosby and Point on the second, Marchand net front. That could work, but you would hope you'd score on your first unit and not have to go to the second, I think.
Well, again, this is the part where it's a tournament, so I am playing Connor McDavid 23 minutes every night. Like, especially with
Right.
the fourth line that Canada's likely going to ice. McDavid and McKinnon are, if they don't hit 21, 22 minutes, and that will also be where like this all-star game vibe might hit. Like if we see at the end of the Sweden game, let's say the Sweden game's real tight down the end, and McDavid and McKinnon are playing 17 or 18 or 19 minutes, that to me tells me we're not treating this like a real tournament.
No. And that Canada's galaxy brained it completely.
Right.
They're
It's like
overthinking it.
if McDavid's at like 22, McKinnon's at 22, Crosby's at 20 or 21, they're like, maybe they're going to do the thing where they might bring out Sorelli line, but maybe they flip Konechny out and put in Crosby or something. I don't know. Like double shift McDavid. Like you have some of the best forwards in the world. Actually, you have the best forward in the world, likely the second best forward in the world. Those guys can be getting double shifts. The schedule is great. That's Sweden, 2 days off, USA, 1 day off, Finland, 2 days off, final. Yeah. Like tons of breaks. So there's no reason to kind of have everybody play 17, 18 minutes.
I do wonder too, from the perspective of just the physicality of the tournament, do you expect it'll be the same as NHL games? Because it's all NHL players, NHL referees, NHL arena, like everything's just basically NHL, but it's high skill guys who don't want to get hurt. So I'm wondering if the physicality is going to be slightly less than like just a regular NHL game. Like who cares what the two teams are?
I think the way Hockey Canada has chosen to construct Team Canada, the way Finland will have to play to stay competitive, that it will remain physical as we would expect it to be. It's not going to be dirty. I don't think there'll be much like in terms of like real skirmishes or anything like that. No fights, obviously, but like,
yeah,
I think there'll be some. It's not going to be all-star level physicality for sure.
Okay.
With that, Brian, let's jump into let's do our predictions. Let's be on the record here. We're going to do finals matchup, tournament MVP, and leading scorer, which I recognize might be the same thing, but probably not with this tournament. Let's do the big one. What is the finals matchup and who wins? Give me a score or two while you're at it.
A score too.
Yeah.
I'm going to be boring and go status quo. I think it's going to be Canada USA. Okay. I think the goaltending's really going to matter against USA specifically. And the US are going to win, 6-3.
Oh boy, wow, 3 goals. That's the bigger surprising part of that. That's the most surprising part of your prediction is Canada scoring 3 goals.
Well, McKinnon, McDavid, Reinhart, Crosby, Point, Marner, like scorers and playmakers galore. Eat your heart out. And then Makar on the point and possibly Bouchard. Like we've got offensive guys to boot. So I think 3 goals is reasonable even against really good goaltending. But the 6 is not surprising because of Canada's goaltending and defense.
Yeah. So people might recall a month ago I said USA Finland was my prediction. I'm going to retract on that. In part, like Finland's starting to get a little banged up. Canada, by the way, is not the only team losing players. Now, other countries are losing players due to legitimate injury. That Canada's the outlier with the Pietrangelo stuff. But Jacob Markstrom, uncertain if he's going to be able to play. Same goes for Charlie McAvoy. As for Finland, losing Miro Heiskanen is just like absolutely devastating.
That's a monstrous hit.
We said they had 3 high-level, 2 to 3 high-level defensemen, and now it's like, well, Ristolainen might have to go to the top pairing, and I just...
Ouch.
You still have Esa Lindell there, like, okay, you still have like someone I really, really trust. It's just like, it was already thin. Like Finland was already an extremely thin team. I just thought in a small tournament with UC Saros and net, Lindell and Heiskanen as your top defensive pairing, that you can shut down enough guys to make it, again, to make it to the final, you have to beat Finland and Canada. I didn't think that would be an impossible task. I'm taking a step back from that. So I will also put Canada in. I'm going to go with a lower scoring final. I'll say 3-0 USA.
Okay. 3-0. Ouch.
Yeah. I just...
Hellebuck's going to stand on his head the way he has all year.
I do. He is just in another level this season. He is gunning for a Hart Trophy. It seems like we're allowed to give the Hart Trophy once a decade to a goaltender, and we haven't used up our 2020 vote yet. So that might be coming this year. If we think back to Theo, we think back to Pricer, Dominik Hasek in the 90s. I think Hasek actually got it twice, but one goalie gets to get it every decade. Let's say it like that. I think Hellebuck's getting there. He is in a different zone this year, that he is making that Winnipeg team look so much better than they are. They play smart. They have some talent, but he might be the reason that team goes very, very far. And I think you put some killers in front of him the same way Team Canada did with Carey Price in 2014. He's going to make it look real easy. So with that, I'll say my tournament MVP is going to be Connor Hellebuck. I think he's giving up 2 goals this whole tournament.
Wow.
I don't see them. They have, first of all, they're going to have the puck so much. We've talked about how great Team USA is structured. They're going to have the puck so much, it might be a thing where they get 21, 22 shots in a game against. And I just think when you have the best goaltender in the world, along with a team that might have the best forward group in the world,
Yeah.
especially
No doubt.
depth-wise, then I think that's an easy pick. He's my tournament MVP. Who did you land on?
I'm still deciding between two guys. I'll tell you who the two are. Quinn Hughes is one of them, and Hellebuck is the other. And I think just to be different, I'm going to go Quinn Hughes. I think he's going to play mid-20s a night in terms of time on ice. He's going to score a ridiculous amount of points. Like, he'll have the most points among defensemen, I'm pretty sure. You're just feeding the puck to those awesome forwards that the USA has. And, like, in general, the US, their defense core is centered around offensive guys. Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy, Adam Fox, Brock Faber even. Like, I would say those are all offensive guys. And then they're sort of helped out Hanifin, Slavin especially, really good defensive guy, and Werenski. Like, but they're more offensive, and the most offensive guy of all is Hughes. So if that's sort of indicative of the way they're going to play, I think tournament MVP is going to be Quinn Hughes, and he might battle for leading scorer, Jordan.
So it's Hughes on power play 1 over Werenski? Is that what we're going with? It has to be, does it?
That's a tough call. That's a really tough over.
First of all, you're talking about 2 of the 3 best defensemen in the NHL this year, with Cale Makar being the 3rd.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in that order. The order, whatever, we can figure it out later. But those are 2 of the 3 best defensemen in the world, and one of them is power play 1. That kind of decides it. If Hughes is power play 1, I very much will tend to agree with. Like, he can finish a tournament with like 9 assists, not even score a goal, just 9 assists in 4 games.
Yeah.
My leading scorer to finish off with that, I went with Jack Eichel. What a season he is having. I've in preparation for this, because of the Pietrangelo stuff, the Theodore stuff, Mark Stone, Jack. Like, there's so many guys. I've been watching more Vegas, and Jack Eichel is just he's a marvel. He's doing great stuff. By the way, and this is who I was referencing earlier when I was talking about Caden Gooley. 10th season in the NHL. He is on pace for only his 3rd injury-free season. But when we think of Jack Eichel, Brian, we're like, wow, fantastic player, delivers in the playoffs, great career so far. Like, he got out of Buffalo, that helped. But when we think about his career, it's like, oh, Jack Eichel's had an as expected career and continuing to get better, but he's also been injured a ton. So, like, people don't have to get worried about Caden Gooley getting hurt all the time. Jack Eichel has almost never been fully healthy, and we still think of Jack Eichel as a very legitimate difference maker. And I think he'll do that in this tournament. I think he'll be on power play 1, which might be the biggest factor in all of this. Is who is on USA's power play 1. You're probably getting your top scorer from them, unless McDavid just explodes, right? There's a universe where McDavid has 11 points in 4 games. Canada loses, but he's just a chaos engine. So my pick was Jack Eichel, but you can give me 8 or 9 different names, and I'd be like, well, yeah, I can definitely see that happening.
That's a pretty good one, man. I'm looking at McDavid, but I'm also looking at McKinnon, I think, a little bit more. Like, when you're on a stage against the best players in the world, the ones who rise to the occasion and the ones with ridiculous beat anybody speed and forcefulness like McKinnon has tend to shine. So I don't know if he's my pick or if I'm going to go with Yoel Armia.
Oh my gosh.
But look, he turns into Gretzky every time there's one of these tournaments. So it's not a bad call. But no, I think I might go McKinnon, man. I think I might go with McKinnon. I want a Canadian guy to be the leading scorer. Now, if this was goals, I think I would actually go with Kyle Connor.
Yeah, you know what?
I think he's going to sneakily just shoot from the hip like he does and score a bunch of goals easily. And he's going to get fed by some of the best playmakers around. So Kyle Connor might be a good one. Also, you picked Jack Eichel. Is he going to be allowed to play? He plays for Vegas as well. I heard that him and Stone might be sick that week. I don't know.
I was going to say, I don't want to jinx it, but does he get LTIR'd right before this? If it's a non-Canada USA player, because we've been very Canada USA dependent, not MVP, who is the one Swedish Finnish guy that used the tournament finish it? And look, there's amazing players on these teams, but is there one player that you're gonna the tournament will finish and be like, damn, he has jumped up a level, if not more?
Ooh.
There's tons of players already, right? Willie Nylander on Sweden, probably going to be the best player, maybe. I mean, Jesper Bratt's having an awesome year as well. Victor Hedman's always doing Victor Hedman stuff. Those are the Swedish guys, but I don't know if there's anyone from Finland you want. Patrick Laine might have a sneaky. again, like he's gonna set up on probably on the power play in the same spot. Like, is that a guy you're gonna watch for and be like, ooh yeah, like Patrick Laine really like rose to the top in this tournament? Is there any other name basically? Because I realize we've been very North American centric.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing this up. There's two from Finland that I would think about, like Mikko Rantanen joining a new team and still doing well, and but the more interesting one I think is Alex Barkov for the Panthers.
Fair.
Because if Finland wants to win, what do they have to do? They have to play incredibly defensively and be opportunistic with their goal scoring, and that's, I can't think of a better player to think of than Alex Barkov in that, like just in that type of NHL player. Incredible defensively and strikes when possible. Barkov from the Panthers would be probably my pick for Finland. For Sweden, that's an interesting one. I wonder if Elias Pettersson, after the recent trade, is just feeling all giddy inside and is just going to have an unbelievable tournament. Yeah, I think Pettersson would be my pick. Like, Nylander's an obvious one. And then there's like Forsberg, who could rise to the occasion. Leo Carlsson, I'm interested to see in this tournament, but I think it's Pettersson. I think he's feeling all warm and fuzzy inside after the trade.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think those are the right names to identify there. Rantanen's great. I think Barkov is the dark horse MVP vote. If Finland beats Canada, if Finland beats Canada in that last game, and Finland gets that final spot over Canada, which might be the case. I don't know. It's going to be, again, the way they've organized this round robin to me is a little funky, but Canada-Finland could potentially be like a de facto semifinal if Sweden's not done well. And at that point, yeah, it could be Barkov, could be Sebastian Aho. Like, there's a lot of different things we could look at. So look, we have gripes with this tournament in terms of how it's been put together. If it's always weird to call it an international tournament but only invite 4 teams. But obviously the quality of play is going to be there, we think, and the game should be really, really competitive. So that kicks off on Feb 12. But in the meantime, we have another week or so of Habs hockey, so we'll focus on that for another week, and that'll do it for this week's episode of This Week in Habsland. We'll be back next week to wrap up the Habs schedule before the Four Nations. Until then, you can follow us on social media at HabslandPod on Blue Sky and TikTok. And if you like what you heard, feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Until next Monday, go Habs.